Hey everybody, we have a great episode of Player Engage for you just ahead of us. To let you know what you're about to hear, you're about to listen to Jack Burrows from NetEase. He's a level designer, and we're going to talk about flow in level design. What does that even mean? How does it work? He's going to tell us stories about how persistence pays off, how diverse gameplay can help make decisions in how you're going to build out your maps, and how constructive criticism helps you grow, and how we need a better avenue to start sharing that content online. It's great stuff. It's going to be a really good episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Player Engage podcast. Greg here. Today, we are talking with Jack Burrows. He is a level designer at NetEase and has also worked for companies such as Treyarch and Activision Blizzard. And we are going to talk about all things level design because I have so many questions and not answers. And Jack is going to be here, hopefully nice enough to answer them for me. Jack, thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to talk about level design, everything in general. Anything you want to say about yourself?
Hey, Greg. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I love talking about this stuff any day of the week. Yeah, I graduated from the Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. I had a lifelong passion, wanted to make games since I was 6 years old. Didn't want to do anything else, so I just followed that beeline as far as it got me. Did not pursue the computer science route. Really just loved design, loved what it feels like to be a player. And I just feel like I found my niche after quite an exciting career getting to where I am now. Finally, in a comfortable, fun, exciting team working on Marvel Rivals for level design. So, yeah, man, it's just been a great route. I've learned a ton, and I love to share it. So,
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear about level design, especially with Marvel Rivals, because there's videos everywhere of all people playing the beta. But before we even get there, right? You said you realized at 6 years old you wanted to be in design. Like, are you sitting in school doodling? Like, are you an artist by trade, or how do you kind of come to that realization that this is for me?
yeah, absolutely. So, I played Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon when I was 6 at a neighbor's house, and it was like just this moment of glory. And every birthday present and Christmas gift is like this begging ritual, like, please can I have the new shiny thing? Or some other friend gets a GameCube, someone else got a PS2. So there was just this like stirring fecundity of friends getting all this new exciting stuff, and I wanted in on all of it as much as I could get. So yeah, I would be in the back of class, half paying attention to anything being taught, regardless of what it was, any subject, because this was just my favorite subject. It was like the queen of the sciences for me. I was just marveling every day at like, why am I, this is so fun. All I want to do is like spend time in these cool worlds, running around with these crazy weapons and tools and stuff. And it was like every game introduced something fresh, so you'd go from playing Jack and Daxter to Sly Cooper to Ratchet and Clank to Smash Bros to Pikmin. It was just this giant oscillating thrill ride of like new experiences, new stories, new music, new game mechanics. So I would just doodle, like, very roughly. Mostly I did writing. I would just write scenarios and scenes and dialogue and try and create like very very amateur drama and stuff, because I just liked what it felt like to go on this thrill ride in these games. It's kind of like watching a movie. Like, you're along for this crazy roller coaster, and I was fascinated by how the game mechanics hook a player and involve the player differently than cartoons do, or like a movie, right? Like, where you're just passive. So that was what was most fascinating to me, is just trying to understand, like, why is shooting guns in this game more fun than that one? Or, oh, the genius of operating your own little army of ants in Pikmin versus, a fighting game where you're learning moves in Smash Bros. Like, all those kinds of things just were these fun threads to sort of analyze and pull and tug and see what I could learn new. Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos, that was another big one. It's like, I had all these introductions and these like rocks that would come and splash the pond, and it would just create like ripple effects for months of, you know very involved obsession and interest from me. So it's just been a fun ride sort of studying all that stuff.
There's so much to unpack there. It's like I don't know the logical next question to ask because it's just like a bunch of crap being thrown against the
Yeah,
wall,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like a lot of people I talk to don't even know they want to be in gaming. It doesn't hit them till later in their life. I am like you, kind of realize that early on, but I don't have any of those skills that you have. So you lucked out there. Did you know right out of the gate that engineering wasn't going to be your thing? I mean, you obviously have that creative bone in your body, right? You were writing stories, you're doing art, you're doing all this stuff. Like, did you even try engineering of any sorts or not your jam?
Well, I knew math was abysmal. I mean, hell, reading was hard enough. Like I had to do all the extra kind of. I was one of those guys, right? I had to go to the reading lab and stuff, and so like just normal academia was tough. Like math never clicked. Still hasn't clicked. And I think when I watch my close friends now who just write code like poetry, like it just their minds are chewing on logic and reasoning in a different way, and it's like they're categorizing this encyclopedic knowledge of this goes there, that follows this, and it's just like you're just speaking in a different tongue. And I tried class, I got like a D in my programming class in college, and but whenever it came to design, we'd make board games or a card game or something. I'm in it, I'm on fire, I'm interested. So in high school I took 3 years of graphic design. So that was like probably the most art focused thing that I did in school, leading up to college at least, where I liked, you know, cool UI. I liked making posters. What helped me get into SCAD actually is I had this game world that I was making for myself that I've always been adding to and really enjoy just as a personal project. And in high school, I made this collection of posters that you would see in the game. Right, so like if you walk around Blade Runner, or if you were to walk around Skyrim, and you see like the wanted posters for thieves or something. I did that for a world that I had made up myself, and SCAD loved it. I got a 5 on the AP graphic design test, which is the best you can get. But like that was my avenue. So yeah, I tried it, but it just never hooked. So it's always been more of like the showmanship of it that I like, the flair, the pizzazz, or the why, right? Like the basic premise of the world that a player walks into, rather than the very intimate nitty gritty like bone structure or architecture of the tech behind the show. I guess I've never been able to grasp that cohesively or coherently.
You also mentioned, the different types of games you were playing when you were younger. You mentioned Smash Brothers, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, and they're all different types of games. And you kind of try to find what is making each one of these addicting, for lack of better words. Right?
Yeah.
And I know, for my listeners, I try and give a list of questions we could talk about, but I didn't send you this. But like a lot of people I talk to come up with pillars. Like when I design something, I want to stick to these pillars. Like, did you learn anything about what makes these games fun, even though they don't share a common thread, right? Smash Brothers is never going to be like Spyro in a way, right? But like, what made them addicting?
Yeah. I think there's a sense of play that is inherent in every human being to begin with, right? Like there's a joy of that. And I think certain games leverage that better than others. And a lot of that has to do with sort of a flow state. And not that it's some like guru mental term or whatever, but like a genuine, if you know the rules of the game, you know the boundaries of the game, then there's a moment where all of the pieces, all the moving parts are clicked and in motion, right? Like a game of soccer, for example. Everyone knows you don't touch it with your hands under certain circumstances, right? Like so everyone's like agreed for this set amount of time to participate with these same constraints and goals. And you just get into the flow. You're just playing the game. And a lot of games that I grew up with maintained that flow magnificently, right? Like I think a lot of the problems people have with games that have come out and maybe in the last decade or so and now, it's like there are interruptions. I don't know if I'm maybe just coming up with this moment, but like it feels like sometimes you're playing a game and then you slam your shin on a coffee table and everything stops, and like the immersion breaks, like the mechanic breaks down, something's not fun, the controls fail, the UI freezes up, right? Or like something becomes illegible. And so in those older games, there was a notation of like there's just this flow of like I'm running around a playground. I'm sliding, jumping, double jump, you roll through this, you swing across that, I switch weapons to that. Each one of those games had a flow state that was just so well maintained from the second you pressed like the main menu start button till you decided to like save the game and walk away. It's like this flowing, beautifully trickling water that it's like it just was uninterrupted. And I think that's part of the showmanship, right? It's like the show must go on, or like somebody does something on stage, could they recover? So even in games that had like a bug or something, back then it was a novelty, right? You'd try in early days of the internet, you want to find the cheat codes or the weird exploits and stuff. Now we just expect every game to come out with that stuff because they're so complicated. So yeah, I think that was like the note that was fascinating to me.
It's funny that you say that because I joke around by telling people like years ago I had a Game Shark and a Game Genie, and you would cheat to kind of put these codes in, and now you just have to pay for that. Everyone's coming out with DLC. It's like the things that used to be broken in the game are now being sold as add-ons to the games, and I always wonder to myself like, is classic gaming ever going to come back? And it really hasn't gone away, but like
Yeah,
it's overshadowed by mobile games, right? For better or for worse, the mobile concept of free to play is taken over, and Marvel Rivals is going to be one that kind of does it, and not a negative to it, but like, is there ever going to be the old days of like picking up a Spyro the Dragon and just playing that platform? And I know it's still around, but I feel like it just gets overshadowed because gamer as a whole is now a bigger category than gamers back then, when it was just like, hey, I had to have a Sega Genesis or had to have a Super Nintendo to be a
yeah,
gamer.
yeah.
I don't know. It's just my ramblings there.
No, I love it. I agree with it.
I want to try and sprinkle some fun questions throughout the podcast. Something I usually just usually save for one moment. But can you give me your top two or three levels of any game that stand out when you're kind of thinking best created levels?
Stormvale Castle in Elden Ring is a masterpiece. It's like, in terms of it being like a dungeon or an isolated thing, you can spend, I swear, 8 hours just running around that one castle. Especially if you, like, for the first time when you don't know what you're doing, it's just this, not a labyrinth because that's too simple. It's this mosaic, this beautiful tapestry of these different challenges and routes and curiosities and like places you can't even get to till later, or you shouldn't even be there till later, and they block that with a tough enemy. It's like all these subtle throttles and presses of the gas and the brake that gives play and rewards players for exploring, like crazy powerful rewards if you find out. It's like all these little veins, this spreading branches of discovery. That one especially is brilliant. um, Other good level design. Let me think. Oh man, that's fascinating. I know I have answers. I'm just, my brain is chewing through so many that I love. Oh, Bleak Falls Barrow in Skyrim. The very first dungeon where you get the golden claw is one of the greatest. That's probably one, if not the best dungeon in the whole game. And it's simple because it's early on, but there's a real genius to like the little breadcrumbing throughout that. Like before you get to the giant spider, if you pay attention, there's a paralysis poison standing on a table before you get to that entrance. So, or there's like that book that has the thief. It's like I think it just says thief or something, and it gives you a skill upgrade. Or there's soul gems that you'll find. Like it's just peppering all these little interesting mechanics that represent the bulk of the rest of the game, in really cool ways. Or like there's the traps that you'll see a Draugr run through and then they get killed. It's just an absolute mastercraft of like game design. It's compelling. It's well put together. It flows great. It's interesting. Like every new corridor has something new. So those are probably two of my favorite examples.
I love it. I appreciate that. And this kind of could go into the next question. A good way to go there is, can you kind of, for a high level, maybe talk to us? What is the role of a level designer, and how do you work with these other teams? For example, when you talk about kind of Stormvale Castle or Bleak Falls, right? Like, are you working with other people that are designing this as well to talk about, hey, here's my vision. How do we make this happen?
Yeah. No, it depends on the scope of the development that you're part of. So mostly in AAA, which is the bulk of my experience, you are a cog in a machine, but not in an ugly, demeaning way. If it's a well-oiled machine, at least. Um, there's a fun process where, and wrote this all out on LinkedIn. It's like I will receive a concept from production, and then that goes to concept art, and they might give me a mood board or something, and then I'll talk to my design leadership, and they'll be like, yeah, we want, a lot of our portfolio for the game has this sort of feel. We'd like, they might even give me one word like frenetic or claustrophobic or you know breathable, and I'll take those sort of faculties into a drawing board, right? And I throw that against the wall, and I'm like, okay, it has to be at this part of the world, at this time in history, with this sort of genre, and these one or two words that are trying to capture the feeling. And so I then design a playground. As far as my understanding is at this point with level design, I think it always follows game design. Always. Game design always comes before level design. Because as a level designer, if I'm making a playground, I need to know what the verbs are that the player can do. Can they run? Can they jump? Can they sprint? Can they slide? Can they mantle? Can they break through a door? Can they peek through a door? Right? Do they have guns? Do they have melee weapons? Can they peek around a corner with a third person camera? All those sorts of verbs and things define the geometry that the level designer is responsible for creating. So it has to, one, facilitate the things the player can do with the character. Two, it has to be immersive, so it has to be tangible, contextualized in the world that the game takes place in. Three, it has to be believable most often, right? Like you can make abstract spaces, but they can't hit a level of like dream state ridiculousness because oftentimes, if you're not paying attention to the design, or if you're designing without intention, then you'll create those coffee table moments where the players will break their flow. So flow is king in, I think, any level design. What does it feel like to move through the space? So, for example, like Bleak Falls Barrow, it's a very linear experience, but there's a lot of those dungeon moments that are sectioned out where the player doesn't just go, from a door to a door to a door, but like how do you get the player to turn their head? How do they look at the puzzle? How do they find the enchanted, battle axe on the table? Can you guide them? Can you direct them? Level design is responsible for all of that. You're facilitating what it's like for the player to be guided through the space, to enjoy the space, to make sense of the space. Yeah, that's, you're like an architect, right, and an interior designer to a degree.
Every time I talk to someone that makes games, it makes it so much more complex and amazing on how these things come together. And the point that you made earlier is like you're a cog in a machine, which again, not in a negative thing. It's just that there's so many moving pieces that have to move. It's like synchronized swimming. Everything has
Yes.
to be going together, and it's just fascinating to hear this. And I'm curious, right? You've worked at Treyarch, you're now with NetEase, you're building Marvel Rivals. Like, a lot of what you're talking about, I feel, and I know I'm not right, is a lot of story driven games. When you're designing a first person shooter or a team shooter type of game, are the same concepts in use?
I wish to God I could speak more about single player games, and I have a serious desire to work on those games because my loves are those games. Dead Space, Bioshock, Metroid Prime, Skyrim. Like that's my bread and butter. Halo. I love those games, and all those single player experiences got me into it. I have not had the full blown AAA professional level design job making those kinds of games yet. I'm hungry for it though. Believe me, I'm itching. But as far as I can understand, and my boss's Thad even has mentioned to me before, like it's very difficult in a different way. There's a lot of waiting for a lot of those mechanics, right? Because in a multiplayer game, every player has access to the same kit, so you're designing an arena for all of those players and those tool sets to operate in sort of a more cohesive way, where there's less surprise. There has to be more predictability, right? Players have to be able to repeat that same space experience. Whereas in a single player game, a lot of it's you running through it once, right? You don't really have to go back to Bleak Falls Barrow and Skyrim after you do it. There's no reason to go back. If you paid enough attention, you were thorough. There's not a lot you can really miss except for like a few trinkets and things. So it's a one through run. A multiplayer map, millions of people will play that same map millions of times. That's a totally different approach and consideration for the geometry, for fairness, right? Like in a single player game, you might be able to uh, throw a player for a loop a few times, but in a multiplayer game, you want to limit those sort of friction points, because there's already going to be the friction of a million boot prints running through that space. So there's radically different approaches, I think, but there's still an essence to it, right? Like flow still matters, legibility still matters, believability, immersion, expression of the mechanics, facilitating that gameplay. All that's the same, but there is a strong difference.
So I'm going to hop back to this, but my second question is, what game are you playing now?
I play all kinds of stuff. I am woefully addicted to teamfight tactics on out of League of Legends. I think I love systems. I love interesting, deep systems. And TFT, be damned, it's almost like a slot machine. It's so fun. It has enough of the randomness element, enough sense of competition, enough strategizing. It's genius. It's a brilliant game. I can't get enough of it. But I play a lot. I replay a lot of stuff, and I often won't beat stuff from beginning to end, but I just like to reference things or refresh myself. So I'm doodling with Baldur's Gate 2. I didn't beat it. I got to go back to my save file. I love Helldivers 2. I love Borderlands 1, specifically the first one. I dabble in playing Dead Space 1 constantly because it's my favorite game of all time. I picked up Diablo 4 again because it's fun to sort of build craft and theory craft with that. So what I've noticed about myself, it's a lot less about yearning for these big adventures and the storytelling, partially because I don't think that many of them these days have done that. exceedingly well or captivatingly, it's not really in the market, right? A lot of the like market isn't favoring those kinds of games, so we don't get them to the same depth or expression or quality that we may have at one point. So I find myself more interested in like what systems, what mechanics are working together in compelling ways, what's new, what's captivating like that. So that kind of, or like Vampire Survivors, right? Like we watched a whole genre being born before our eyes. That's a really fun type of game. So it's fun to go on Steam and see if I can't find clones of that that spin it in a different way or execute the same concept differently. So it's a nice shotgun. It's a nice broad spread of different stuff I'll play right now.
Yeah, this you mentioned it on our pre-calls that you got to respect good games and play good games, and I love it how you're finding the games that you love and you're playing them again, but like moments in games to re-experience them because you probably can see them differently. Like once you know how the sausage is made, it's like, oh, all right, I'm going to start looking at this from a different lens and maybe take some notes. Like I know this is a weird question, but do you ever sit down with like a notebook or something and like take notes on like, hey, I really love this. He's going to show me the notebook now for people that aren't.
I have, oh man, for the Dead Space remake, dog. Let me tell you, it just page after
Oh,
page after page after page. Yeah, like I wrote, you sit down, and if you're passionate enough, if you care about the IP, you'll just, oh, this is crap, this is garbage, this is dumb, this is really good. Oh, genius, brilliant. Oh, that's good. It's like it just sometimes depends. Or my buddy Tyvik Stallworth, he's a combat designer with Sucker Punch. He and I, he's my best friend. He and I will sit down and we'll, with a new game, or I'll invite him over. Like when Starfield came out, he came over. He's supposed to come over, and we were going to go get lunch. We didn't eat a thing. We were there for 6 hours, and we were both up at the screen pointing out, oh, look at this UI connects to that, and it makes sense with this. But this is friction point. I don't know where my UI is. Right? Where's this taking me? Look at this gameplay. This is disappointing, but this is great. That's the kind of like energetic way that I'll sit down playing anything.
I love it. I am envious. That sounds like such a fun experience. And I often hear about people in movies don't like movies anymore because they're working it. But when you can play the game, you can start pointing this out. I feel like that's such a fun time, and you can say you're working because you're playing games. And
Yeah, that's right.
um, I want to go back to what you said a little earlier is kind of designing a multiplayer map. It's interesting. I haven't put much thought into this, but like you said, you play Skyrim, you go through Bleak Falls, and like you're not coming back unless you want to pick up trinkets. Whereas with Rivals and same with COD, right? You're playing the same map over and over again. So traversal is interesting because with everything we've seen about Rivals, you have everyone moving differently. You have Spider-Man flying through the map. You have tanks. I don't know why I can't think of tanks in the game right now. In the game, right? Like, how do you, as a level designer, go to a map that's a blank slate, thinking, all right, how do I design this map for people that can traverse in all these different ways?
Yeah, it's tricky. A lot of it, I think, in these kinds of games has to do with the game mode itself. So, what's the objective, right? Like, at least that's how I think about it. I focus on what is the player attempting to achieve? What are they trying to do? And as a whole, the team collectively, they have to get the objective, right? Whether that's capturing a point and holding the point. Well, so even then there's two encounters, right? And every hero, every type of hero, like tanks, DPS, and healers, they're all coming to that first objective in a different way, right? Maybe the tanks want to just get there first and start setting up barriers or walls or defenses. The DPS wants to take position so that they can keep the other team off the point. The healers have to position themselves to support both of those other players that are doing that. That's just to approach the objective. Once they've captured the thing, that's a whole nother game. How do we hold it? Right? So maybe their positions change. Maybe the angles that will change. They'll try and create choke points. In Marvel Rivals, there's a lot of cool destructible environments, right? Can we recreate the bottleneck? That's a really cool, fun mechanic that we've got that I'm really excited about fleshing out and playing with more. But those are the kinds of things that you have to think about, right? It's less about how do I make Hulk perform really well here, or this is a great Spider-Man avenue. It's more like how can the hyper-mobile characters succeed here? How can the slower tanks succeed here? Does it feel good to walk up as a healer? There's more broad strokes because this the characters, the cast of characters have such specific defined uniqueness to them that you have to sort of, in my mind, go back a step and look at more the broad, what do all the tanks do, what are they trying to do, what are they trying to achieve, and that's easier to influence the geometry, right? Rather than saying, oh, Iron Man should be able to fly through this. No, like flying characters, right? High mobile characters that can access that, does it give them an interesting vantage point? those are some of the like the more broad strokes that you work with. And then all of like the fine tuning, like, oh, cut this corner, polish that flow, narrow this hallway, shorten this path. All that kind of stuff comes from iteration, which is only achievable through playtesting. We have to playtest the bejesus out of everything, because it like, unless you see where the friction is happening in the machine, right? It's like you start playing and then friction starts happening everywhere. Oh, this is a choke point. This is too tight. This ceiling's too high. This is too low, right? You don't know that until you play, and until you play with a bunch of people and you ask them. You have to talk to them. So it's a very active process. It's a very engaged process. It's very flowy. It's very, ebb and flow. Because my coworker Cliff, one of the best level designers I've ever seen, ever worked with. He emphasizes a lot, like, it's easy to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? It's easy to get rid of the good things, the things that we do like, the things that are successful, because we get negative feedback or we get harsh critique. And it's easy to overwrite things that are fundamentally successful, that this element, this geometry, this area is doing well. This stuff isn't doing well. Some of it's spotted throughout both, right? Like, there's good stuff here, there's bad stuff there. Polishing, iterating, that comes with playtesting.
I like that. It's something that I think people need to hear, is that just because you get constructive criticism doesn't mean everything needs to go. It means let's take a look at what you've created and see where we can improve upon, rather than throwing everything out and starting again. But I want to keep on that topic, because you talked about feedback from not only internally, right? You play with your friends as well, but like, your game's going to get comparisons to games like Overwatch, to other team shooters, right? Like, do you get, you just had your second, I think, open beta, right? Or something like that. Like, do you get feedback from others in the industry? Like, yo, I love your game, but have you considered this? Or is it like tough to get that information from people?
I think it can kind of come. I don't even know how to articulate this. It almost feels like it has no rhyme or reason. So we might I literally made a post on LinkedIn. If you are playing in the beta, please tell me your feedback. And I got maybe 2, 3 comments. One person actually messaged me directly with tangible feedback, actual pinpointed bullet point. One person out of like 2,500 people, allegedly, that see my stuff. And I'm like, what is the hesitation? And I think there's like a strange resistance to wanting to be honest or to engage. I don't know what it is, but we get it a ton from Discord. We get it from the masses, from the players and things, but professionally, it's rare. In fact, it's like, it seems either almost non-existent, or there's no avenue, there's no channel for it. I don't know what it is. I think people are nervous about saying things and hurting people's feelings because they might work with them someday, right? Everybody always talks about how small the industry is, and it is small. True, it's totally true. It's absolutely true. The amount of people that you'll work with at one point that will then shotgun out to a million other places, it's like, the impressions you make matter. They last. But it's disappointing to me. It's deeply frustrating that people can't distinguish between a professional analysis of a game and their own personal opinion or feelings about the individual, right? It's like, I want you next to me at the workbench, not across from me, right? Like, it's not a trial. It's a piece of work that we get to look at and analyze on the table, on the bench, in the shed, in the garage, in the operating room. Explain to me how you got to this. Well, that's fascinating. What about that? Do you think this would be better if that, right? Like, that just doesn't happen. I don't see it happen unless it's happening behind individual closed doors where someone might say, hey man, saw your game, great stuff, I love it. I try and make the effort with my friends that I know make things. A beta comes out, hey, give me a key, let me get in there, and I give them a rundown, I give them bullet points, and some of my close friends, like some of my buddies worked on Concord, and I played it, I gave it my time of day because I respect them, I respect the work that they're trying to do. And I think their time and effort is worth an honest evaluation from a peer, from a colleague, right? I think it's disrespectful for us not to be honest with each other. Because if I see the bus coming and I don't warn you while you're standing in the street, I'm a shitty friend, right? Not to say that it's always a negative thing, or it's like, hey, you're about to throw out those roses, or you're not pruning these daisies. Like, I want you to take care of the thing that I think you're doing is awesome. And sometimes that means pruning, right? Sometimes that means trimming, it means cleaning, it means picking the bugs off a thing. And I think that's a disservice to each other when that doesn't get facilitated, when that gets, hushed, or people are too sensitive about it. That's just the truth. We only detriment from it. There's no benefit. There's no benefit from niceties and calmness because it's not real. No one's being authentic. No one's, not that you have to beat each other over the head, but there's just a reality of, if you're my colleague, I want to respect you and your work by being real, by being authentic. And I want that. I want that feedback for my work. How are you going to get better otherwise? Like,
Yeah.
you don't. You're just an echo chamber otherwise. So that's what I think.
Yeah, we with Help Shift, we deal a lot with the customer support side of things, and we see a lot of the customer support leaders are very protective of what they do, and just like, no, share your strategies. Like, it's not a competition versus you or versus them who's providing the best customer support. At the end of the day, when you provide the best customer support, you're providing the best product to the customer, right? It's not, it's constructive criticism again, right? Like, hopefully you're not going to be offended. And I think that's the world we live in, unfortunately, today, is where
Yes.
everyone's going to take everything too personally, where it's like, the only way to get better is told where you mess up. If you are an employee to your boss, you should go to your boss and say, hey, give me where I can improve, what I could do better. Like, don't just tell me the niceties, because that's not going to help me grow as a person. And I
Yes.
find it fascinating that in the industry, especially with such a high profile IP that where everyone wants to play it right now, like, you're not getting that feedback. That's nuts that out of what, 2,500 people, you've only heard from a couple. Like,
Yeah, well, that's just
my,
me, right? I'm
right.
only one. I'm only one signal tower. That's my experience. I'm
Yeah.
sure we have channels and official things and other stuff like that, but just in my
Crazy.
individual experience, when I'm like, "Tell me," and then no one tells me.
Jack, if you're going to go to a bar, what's the drink you're ordering?
Oh, a White Russian,
White
immediately.
Russian.
Yeah, I watched The Big Lebowski one
Yeah.
time, and I'm like, "That's it. That's the drink
Sold.
I want forever." And I got it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is delicious." I actually host a lot of parties throughout the year at home with my family, and I make a cloudy Russian where I just take like whipped cream out of the can and just like, but it looks gross. It's not great. It's nowhere
So
near as smooth as a bartender would, but I love that drink.
awesome. Love it. Um, I want to talk a little bit about how you got to where you are, because you went to SCAD, you were in level design, and now you're working for maybe one of the most anticipated games of 2025, right? How do you end up at a company like Treyarch? Like, how do you head down that path?
I tried for months when I graduated in 2017 to get a design job, and I had awards for games we'd made in college. I had game jams. I had a paid internship, and none of it translated. I almost got a few jobs, but it didn't click. So I didn't give up, but I was like, well, I'm just going to take what I can get. And so there was this quality assurance test position for Activision specifically in El Segundo, California, and it was working on Call of Duty World War II, made by Sledgehammer. And so I got it. And, I'm in. I made it, and it was a grind. It was such a grind. From my very first day, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 months straight through launch. It was gnarly. It took me an hour through the worst traffic on the planet in downtown LA to get there in the morning, and an hour to come home at the same time of day. Not the same time of day, but it was awful. It was horribly hard, and it was so detached from actually working on the game itself. I was like filtering bugs that another QA team were making to make sure that it made sense when it actually got to the developers. And we were writing our own bugs too, and doing a lot of different kinds of testing and stuff. But it was gnarly. But I was like, okay, well, this isn't it yet, but I'm on my way. And so I would talk to people, right? You have to be active. I would tell my boss, I don't want to be here forever. How do I get there? And people will tell you. People want to help you. The manager of that place was awesome. My buddy Kevin, who's now like the head of QA for Infinity Ward, he was a total mentor, a total guide, because he had worked with the QA at Treyarch quite a bit. So, you prove yourself. All right, I got the job, I got the rough end, I got the bottom of the totem pole. I'm in. I'm going to do this as best as I can. When I got the QA job at Treyarch and I was leaving the Activision studio, the manager of that office, he was like, hey, do us proud, right? Show respect that when you get there, we trained you well. And they did, but I got there and immediately I'd never had to write crash bugs, or I didn't know how. Like, Treyarch just had a whole nother system, and so you just make connections, right? Like, I had recommendations from the Activision guys, like, hey, this guy's a good tester, whatever, and I got in. And then I maybe had a month before we started Black Ops 4, the Death March QA. So that was again 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, 10 to 10, baby, for God, until launch. I started in February of 2018 and was there through until April of 2019. And a lot of that was crunch. A lot of that was that same exact schedule for a long time. But they had an internship program that I knew individuals that had gotten in that way. In fact, there was a girl named Kendall I went to school with. She was in my game design classes, and she was a level designer at Treyarch. And I think she went through the internship program. And so I'm QA walking into Treyarch every day, right? It's just one step closer. You got to keep the fire. I'm walking in. I'm making 12.50 an hour, right? Or now I'm making 15 an hour. Like, you just take the little victories, but you have to keep the same motivation. So I would talk to the recruiter who was down the hall from the QA lab, or I would message on inter company channels the level designers. Hey, I saw you got in this way. How do I do what you do? Could I take you to lunch? So I would pay for the lunch. I'd take them out. We'd sit outside. I'd ask them questions. What did you do? How did you get there? How do you do it now? How can I stand out? Those sorts of things. And so you build relationships. Well, first you do your job that you're there to do well. You do it well, and you do it hard and fast as best you can. You make good connections. You let the people there get to know you, right? Be real. You connect with them. Just see them every day. Be friendly. And then you got to take motivation, or you got to seize your ambition. So I knew that I could learn the Radiant tool set, which is the engine that COD uses, if I bought Black Ops 3 with my own money and I download the Steam mod tools. And then I was watching tutorials on YouTube on my breaks as a QA tester. The QA boss comes and sees me doing this. Says, "Why do you have this open?" And I said, "Because I don't want to be here forever. I want to be a level designer downstairs." And he's like, okay. 2 weeks later, he comes back and he says, "The level design team needs specific QA work. You're going to do it." So now I built relationship with those level designers that ended up hiring me for the internship. I was one of 17 people for the Treyarch internship out of 1,600 applicants. And they were supposed to take college graduates, or people that were still in college as an internship. I was 2 years out of college, and I was in the trenches, but I knew people, and I made an effort to know them, not to use them, but to know them and to be known by them, right? To make connections, make relationships, and make my desires known, and to back it up. I had a resume. I had work that I showed that I could do it. It was just a lot of God's providence, a lot of effort, a lot of patience. My God, which I didn't really have. Right? It's easy to say you had patience looking back on it, but in the time, no, I just had fire that never went out. I was just hungry and starving for it, and it played out, and I made the application and finally got in. And it was a dream. It still is the dream. It's the same dream now as it was the day I got the internship.
We talk a lot about the idea of networking, even if it's just internally, because sometimes your companies are so big you don't know what these other teams do and you don't understand why they're actually here. And I love the fact that you are grinding, you're putting that work in, but you're also curious, like, what's this person doing? How do I get into this? And I think, when you start networking with people and you realize people just love to talk about what they do and how they do, and they
Yes.
just talk, 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 and it's great. It's like you just listen, you become a sponge and absorb all that information. It's just like, all right, and then when it's time, like, they'll look at you and be like, "Hey, Jack, I know you're interested in this. It's awesome," and just shows you that it really makes a difference when you get to know these people.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to let them get to know you so that they can help you, right? That, like, each person knew what I wanted, and I wasn't a miserably unlikable person, so it was easy for them to be like, "Hey, let me help you out. Let me point you where you got to go."
When you are a level designer, what's, and most of these answers don't have direct answers, but like,
Sure.
what's the next logical step? Where do you want to go from there?
Well, to be honest, level design is a means to an end for me. I just had this prep talk with myself this morning because sometimes you just need to do that.
Fresh
I
off the
have
cooker here.
I have a dream. I have a dream of walking out on a trade show and presenting to the world a game that has been born either of my mind and made by the product of brilliant, focused, motivated teammates. I want to create a world. I want to say something to this industry about the industry, not like some manifesto. It's like, as an artist, you look at the great works, and each of those works is an exclamation. It says, "Here I am. Here's my Here's what I'm going to say about this medium. Play BioShock, play Gears of War, play Halo, play Dead Space, right? Play Mass Effect. They're statements. They're beautiful statements about the medium. Here's what this art form can do. Here's the worlds it can paint. I want to do that. I've been enjoying these statements my whole life. I have something to say as an artist. I have something to create as an artist. That is my dream. I have a world that I'm chewing on, that I'm brewing, that I'm building, and I love it. I'm so excited about it. I hope for it. But my professional career is aiming, always the purpose is to teach me, to help me grow. How do I do that? How do I do that? Right? What does it take? What does it cost to get it at the scope or the quality that I would want? I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if I'm 83 walking onto that stage. I have a vision. I'm hungry for it. Every day I walk into work, how can I grow towards that vision? How can I learn what level designers do? How can I work with the programming team? How can I work with production? How can I smooth out my rough edges, right? Working with people. How do I smooth out when I get frustrated with something? I want to grow every day towards that goal. I have the vision. I can taste it. I can see it in my mind's eye for the game and for the dream itself. And it's not for my glory, right? But it's for the glory of this art form, which I think is so powerful. I think it's so great. I want to use it to plant seeds of hope in people's hearts, and just through an awesome package, through a face melting blockbuster smash hit. We play enough amazing games. We have to be learning. We have to be gleaning from these masterpieces enough for, as a creator, to say something ourselves. I want to do that. We've played enough. I've seen enough. I've tasted enough. I'm hungry. I want to say something too. So everything, especially with level design, that's the end goal for me, right? I once asked a guy, and I'll never forget this, who graduated SCAD and he got an internship at Naughty Dog. And I said, Paul, are you destined for greatness? And he said, me? No. He said, I'm destined to make a living. And I thought that was the stupidest, saddest answer I'd ever heard in my life. I was like, come on, man. We make worlds in this industry. Like, we make things that change people's lives, that they get to walk into. I want more than that. I don't just want to get a paycheck. I want to participate in birthing worlds. I want to leverage what this art form can do. And so I want to be a great level designer, right? I want to be a great designer. I want to be a great narrative designer. I want to be, a great lead. I want to be a great creative director. That's my goal. My next major career milestone. How do I be a creative director? What does it take to do that? So I surround myself and I ask questions. I poke Thad and my boss, Paul Ella, every day. Hey, how do you get a game funded? What's the best method? What publisher does this or that best? All those sorts of things I'm always asking. So that's my trajectory. If another level designer might just want to be a lead, right? Maybe they don't even want to manage people. They just want to be an expert level designer. Everyone's goals are different, but that's my dream.
I don't know how I continue this interview after that. That was just such a perfect way to just. I love it. I mean, I agree with you, right? Like, we need more of these world builders. We need to be immersed in games, and Elden Ring was a great example of that, and all the Last of Us that do that, like, amazing. But there's so much room for improvement, and I feel like the industry is going one way with gaming when we're missing those moments, and it's just like, unfortunately, those games don't make as much money as some of these other games do. But like, you
Yeah.
need that amazing game, something that just kind of blows your socks off. It's just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
If you were graduating today and you went to school for something gaming related, would you take a different path or would you do it all over again?
Oh, hell no. I wouldn't change a minute of my life. Not a second. Heck no. I would walk into those offices. I'd sit in that traffic. I'd eat the pizza that they'd leave for us on a Friday night. You better believe it, dog. I would do every second of that again. I would do the same route. I mean, to a degree, I wasn't good enough to walk in the door, right? I hired interns at Treyarch who were good enough out the gate. Like, one was a SCAD alumni, another was a Pasadena Art College grad, and those guys they were crisp. They were focused. They were motivated. They were skilled. They had it. I didn't have it coming out the gate, or maybe I did, right? But maybe I didn't know how to sell it well enough. I don't know. Some people have it enough out the gate. So yeah, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I think if you feel like you're not making progress, sweep the floors where the thing is happening that you want to be part of. Whatever, be there, be involved, participate at whatever level you have to, right? And then if you're not getting progress, you have to self-analyze. You have to say, oh, I'm bad at this, or this is crap, but I'm great at this, and I'm going to lean on that. And then you just, with patience and prayer, baby, you make your way one step at a time.
And to your last point there, sometimes it's good to have a good manager that can help point you in that right direction, right? You may not know your next logical step, but someone might be able to help point you. And when you're managing interns, you might be able to see, like, hey, you do have it. You're going to end up here, and I know you can end up there. Or there just might be people who are lost, and that's okay because it's a big world out there, and no one really
Yes,
knows what else is out there.
that's right.
Jack, you ended this on such a high note and such a perfect note, and I feel like it's a great place to kind of wrap up the interview for now because I will bother you again in the future after Rivals comes out or the next playtest to keep bothering you and
Can't wait.
give you feedback on the levels here.
Please.
This was awesome. I really appreciate your drive, your motivation, and I will be first in line at whatever game store still exists when your game comes out. Um, I believe in you and the way the passion you have from there. I love the concept of sharing best practices throughout the industry. You already have a network there. Even going back to the game design, kind of how game design comes first and level, like things I never thought about. Like, can you jump? You can jump. You can create platforms. Who would have thought that?
That's
Um,
right.
so much I've learned here, and I appreciate it. Before we do end today, is there anything you'd like to just share with our audience, or anything?
I think speaking to the people who are entering the industry, right? Because there's enough turmoil and folks who chew and talk about this stuff who are struggling with all the losses and jobs and things and the rubber banding effect of the industry. But I think for people getting into it, I don't want anyone to think they're not destined for greatness, right? And that's defined either relatively or by their own metrics. But I love igniting that flame because I think it's easy, and I watched it happen in my peers in college, and especially when we got out of it. There's a temptation to lose that spark, to lose the flame that gets you into the thing in the first place. Like making games, making video games. Like name a better job. Like name a more exciting, interesting job. It can be hellish. It can be grueling. It can be hard. It can be debilitating. It could be gnarly, right? But would you rather do that or something else? There's a level of monotony that so many professions in the world have, right? There's a tedium. You're always doing the same thing to the same little end. But we get to make something that can literally spin someone's life on a dime, right? There's enough stories you can find of people who played the right thing for them and it changes their life, or it breathes life into them, or it pulls them out of a dark place. Like there's so much power that this medium has, and it's so human at its deepest levels, and we can leverage that, right? It doesn't have to just be a cash grab. It doesn't have to be something that stuffs the pockets of shareholders. Like it can say things. And when you see people like the guy who made Stardew Valley alone, that's a one-man job, and he made one of the greatest games ever made. You can do that, damn it. Like we can do that stuff. We can totally do it. It's just a matter of accepting the life that it allots us. And that can be okay, right? If that's not the life you want to live, then do something that will pay for the life you want. But if you want passion, if you want purpose, if you want direction, and this is something that you enjoy, then do it, right? Cut the corners where you need to. Let life shave itself off where it has to. But if you get to wake up every day and participate in building something like we get to do, come on, man. That's a damn beautiful thing. That's an awesome thing. Like leverage that, lean into it, take the student debt, whatever. I'm still paying mine off for the next 13 years, and I wouldn't change a minute of it. Give me the $12 an hour. I'll get in there and I'll find those bugs. Whatever it takes, dog. Whatever it takes to be a creator and participate with folks. That's what I'm talking about. It's such a special industry. It's such a special gig. I don't want anyone to lose that kind of fire, especially when they're starting out.
Amazing passion, and we need more leaders like you in the industry to put gaming first and understand the true power of the medium, whether it be someone who's depressed and pulling them out of depression, or something that just someone's lonely and needs something to do. There's so much power here, and you just expressed it beautifully. So thank you, and thank you for your time today and just joining us again. I look forward to annoying you again in the future to pull you on again, but I really appreciate your time. We'll have URLs to anything Jack has mentioned. We'll have it to NetEase. We'll have it to Marvel Rivals. We'll have it to his LinkedIn profile if he's cool with it. But Jack, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your passion today. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. And good luck with the rest of the production as well with Marvel.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's my
Cheers.
pleasure.